ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, good morning. You're listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing with me, Arlene, on our ASEAN Daily, where we bring you news from Southeast Asia. On our beautiful Monday morning, it's still a bit hazy, but the weather pattern is quite, I would say, fine in Kuala Lumpur, but elsewhere, thick haze is still surrounded in the area of Indonesia, Singapore, and of course it has reached up to southern Thai and southern Philippines. Well, while the haze is definitely not putting a cheerful mood to all of us, but on the other hand, we also want to bring you other news that is also has been impacting our neighbor, Hong Kong. 100 injured in a ferry accident, and the accident had caused at least 100 people injured when a high-speed ferry traveling from Hong Kong to Macau hit an unidentified object in the water. This is according to authorities there. Pictures show wounded people being stretched off the boat, some wearing oxygen masks, onto a pier in Hong Kong's central financial district to waiting ambulances. Well, at the same time, so far it is understood around 100 people have been injured. Local media reported a large rescue operation mounted involving air services, marine police and the fire department before the boat was towed back to Hong Kong Island. An APF reporter on the scene later saw some 20 ambulances waiting near government pier as passengers give statement to police. While a subsequent inquiry found that a litany of errors contributed to the accident, the city's worst maritime disaster over 40 years. The tragedy shocked the Asian financial hub, one of the world's busiest ports, which has prided itself on its good safety record. Moving on from Hong Kong, we talk about Malaysia. As you all know, the budget 2016 has been revealed last week on Friday, and a lot of different opinions came out of different parties. One of it is from the Member of Parliament of the opposition party, Charles Santiago. He mentioned that the budget 2016 failed to address crucial problems faced by Malaysians. Charles explained that issues like the rising cost of living and the Rakyat's lack of confidence towards the government and Prime Minister Datuk Sri Najib Abdul Razak's administration were not addressed. He may also add further that there are long-term issues as to how Malaysia is going to achieve Vision 2020 of being a high-income nation. There's also no mention of whatsoever of how Malaysia is going to achieve that goal, and this is he thinks is due to the government being in a crisis, and because of that it makes people think that the nation will be unable to achieve the vision. And that also was shared by a couple of economists in Malaysia that somehow are skeptical on the budget 2016, on its allocation and whether it actually fits into the overall goal of the government to achieve Malaysia as the high income nation. From Malaysia, we also want to talk about the Philippines. Residents is trying to pick up their lives after Typhoon Koppu. It has been a week since Typhoon Koppu made landfill path of destruction across the central part of the northern island of Luzon. Tens of thousands of people were displaced during the height of the storm, the worst this year, and it is expected to take a while before life can return to normal again for residents. Celia Villamor is still struggling to reclaim her life. She lives on a low-lying area of Kalumpit, Bulacan, and saw her house inundated with 1.5 meter high waters that washed away all her belongings. When Typhoon Koppu hit the Philippines, it caused flash floods that submerged coastal villages and displaced tens of thousands of residents. In fact, around 60,000 people had fled their homes in Bulacan and Pampanga, which acts as a catchment basin for water from the northern provinces of Nueva Ecija and Aurora. In Nueva Ecija, residents have also struggled to fix the damage caused by the typhoon. Flooding and landslides have left paths of destruction, and it will be a long time before people can return to their normal lives. It seems like the Typhoon Koppu, just like a couple of other disasters in Southeast Asia recently, has shown that climate change would probably become one of the biggest challenges for ASEAN. In the early months in this year, we saw flash floods and of course a monsoon flood hit areas in Malaysia, also in Indonesia, and now we are seeing of course last month was the Myanmar were hit by a huge flood as well. Now we are seeing that the Philippines is also facing the same kind of plights. So ASEAN definitely needs to step up its game when it comes to addressing climate change. In fact, talking about the haze, on the earlier discussion about how haze has hit Mindanao, Philippines is cancelling flights, alerting hospitals over haze. The Philippines has cancelled flights and put hospital on alerts as its southern and central islands are covered by thickening haze from the Indonesian forest fires. Smoke from Indonesian slash and burn farming has choked vast expanses of Southeast Asia for weeks, killing at least 10 people, forcing events to be shut down and schools to close across the region. In fact, international efforts to douse and the blazes have done little to clear the air, and Filipino authorities warn ash levels were becoming increasingly dangerous in the southern islands. The Department of Health is advising those who have breathing problems or respiratory diseases to wear face masks in areas covered by haze. This is according to presidential spokesman Herminio Coloma. And hospitals in the south were also ready to receive anyone affected by the haze. 6 flights to central and southern islands were cancelled, by the way, or delayed. In fact, on Sunday due to the thickening smoke after thousands were left stranded over the past 10 days. We will take a short break. When we return, we'll continue discussing about the political side of Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, welcome back. This is Arlene and you're of course listening to our ASEAN Daily podcast. So, continuing our discussion about the political issue in Southeast Asia, Australia is not doing enough to ensure free and fair Myanmar poll. As we all know that Myanmar will face its biggest poll or general election next month on November 8th. But Australia is not doing enough to ensure Myanmar's coming elections are free and fair, despite helping to fund them. This is according to pro-opposition activists. Thousands of Myanmar nationals across the world have been shut out of advance voting 2 weeks before the election, which is seen as a landmark test of the reform process. Sydney-based Dr. Hin Sadarite said that she applied for an early ballot 2 months ago, but only to find her name absent from the early voters list just days before the October 17 pre-voting date. There have been widespread complaints from Myanmar nationals abroad, including in Singapore, Thailand and Australia, about irregularities of being shut out of advance voting. Myanmar nationals in Australia told SBS their names weren't on any list or were not registered with Myanmar's embassy in Canberra. In fact, critics of Myanmar's election process said Australia's funding contribution to next month's parliamentary election in Myanmar obligates it to do more to ensure the poll is free and fair. Probably this is the first time Myanmar ever organized a general election of such scale. A lot of irregularities would happen, but it's how that countries are able to address this that is the most important thing. Talking about ASEAN Women Recommendation to be tabled at the 27th ASEAN Summit. The joint recommendations from the ASEAN Conference on Women in Politics, which was held recently, will be tabled during the 27th ASEAN Summit next month. This is according to Malaysia's Wanita Barisan National Chief, Datuk Sri Shahrizad Abdul Jalil. Shahrizad said among the recommendations were to enhance connectivity and innovations among ASEAN's women politicians. She also mentioned that resolutions will be refined before being submitted to the Prime Minister. She hoped that ASEAN will give more emphasis on the issues to be highlighted, because issues coming from women delegates of political parties who have brought a victory to their parties during the general elections in their respective countries are not necessarily being highlighted enough. The inaugural Women in Politics Kuala Lumpur conference team promoting representation through connectivity and innovation was organized by Barisan Nasional and participated by more than 100 delegates from 24 political parties. Meanwhile, Shahrizad also concluded that the conference was well received, interesting, especially by ASEAN women involved in politics. Moving on to ASEAN, to another issue also affected ASEAN. Well, China and ASEAN issued declaration on security cooperation. China and ASEAN issued a joint declaration on law enforcement cooperation last week. The declaration came during a ministerial meeting in Beijing on regional security and common development. According to the declaration, which was achieved during the ministerial meeting, finalized during the ministerial meeting, the dialogue mechanism will be established with other countries and international organizations welcome to join. The China-ASEAN Inter-Ministerial Meeting on Law Enforcement and Security will now be held every 2 years. Interestingly, the China's Public Security Minister Guo Shengkun addressed a parallel meeting on security cooperation along the Mekong River on Saturday, attended by police chiefs from Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. The One Belt and One Road initiative presents new opportunities for law enforcement cooperation. In fact, a joint statement on law enforcement cooperation along the Mekong River was adopted at the meeting, inviting Cambodia and Vietnam to be observer states in the mechanism. So anyway, we'll take another short break. When we return, we'll discuss on the economic side of Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back. This is Arlene on the economic side of Southeast Asia. Regarding on Myanmar, it is importing palm oil to meet cooking demands in the country. In fact, Myanmar has imported 400,000 tons of palm oil annually to fill demand of edible oil as an alternative. This is according to official report by the government. Domestic edible oil produced from peanuts is 500,000 tons a year, while edible oil consumption is 900,000 tons. The Edible Oil Dealer Association was quoted saying, the association attributed to the low edible oil production to less number of peanut oil mills in operation nationwide. Since 2011, Myanmar has granted private companies to import palm oil from Malaysia and Indonesia in a bid to meet the demand. Malaysia entrepreneurs have introduced their palm oil to Myanmar market over the past few years. And on the other hand, talking about economy, we see that Thailand's growing links with Qatar for its Look East policy. This is Qatar's own Look East policy, in fact, and Thailand is becoming an increasing important component out of it. One aspect of this Look East is Qatar's relations with Thailand, a potential market for almost 67 million customers. In terms of bilateral trade volume between the two countries amounted to around 4 billion last year. Qatar's exports are dominated by energy products, while Thailand's major exports include jewelry, furniture, automobiles, and electronics. Aware of the potential of stronger economic ties, the two countries are also trying to conclude a tax treaty which would enhance trade and investment opportunities. Not surprisingly, energy cooperation has also been the axis around which the Qatar ties revolve. Moving on to inequality. In fact, rising inequality hampers poverty in Laos. On average, poor countries have grown more rapidly than rich countries, causing between country inequality to fall. But inequality has also increased within many developing countries such as Laos. This trend threatens social and political stability. Measured inequality has increased at the national level, with both rural and urban areas within almost all provinces of Laos and within each of the four major ethnic groups of the Lao population. Laos experience raises several important questions about the nature of national inequality that remain unanswered by the LECS. First, to what extent is rising inequality in private consumption mitigated by a more equal distribution of public provided services? Secondly, what economic or other forces have been driving the increase in private expenditure inequality? Whether the increase in expenditure inequality is a serious public policy problem for Laos is debatable. Some increases in inequality might be inevitable in a poor country like Laos undertaking a wide-reaching program of economic reform is definitely a need, as in Laos over the past 2 decades. We will take a short break. When we return, we'll discuss on the arts and culture side of Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene. You're listening to me again at our Durian ASEAN Daily, where we bring you news from Southeast Asia, this time on arts and culture. So, China is smuggling endangered rare Philippine turtles. China demands for forest turtle is threatening an endangered species found only on one Philippine island. Wildlife officials said on Sunday the Philippine forest turtle found only in the western island of Palawan is one of the numerous freshwater turtles being taken by poacher for sales to China, said Arlene, Chief of Staff at the Palawan Council for Sustainable Development. They sell them mainly to the Chinese exotic food and medicine trade and the pet trade. They are smuggled out of the country. Some are even traded on the high seas. The reptile, also known as Palawan forest turtle, is listed as a critically endangered species by the International Union of the Conservation of Nature and is found in forests and streams. It has a brown-black shell and can be recognized by a light-colored stripes across its head behind its ears. On the other hand, in Thailand, come for the fun, snap for selfie, but don't forget to be careful of the law there. There's a nation where authorities have recently warned that flashing a bottle of beer in your selfies could be punishable by a year in prison.
sounds ironic, is not in Saudi Arabia nor in Iran. Strangely, it's a place where people from around the planet flock to boozy holidays, which is Thailand, among the most popular destinations in ASEAN. And also in Asia, the latest injunction warns that the social media post displaying a booze brand's logo could be interpreted as encouraging another to consume an alcoholic beverage, which is already forbidden under Thai law. The maximum penalty? A 14,000 fine of US dollar fine, a year in prison, all often snapping a selfie while downing a bottle of Carlsberg. That's kind of odd. This warning was issued after dozens of Thai celebrities' Instagram accounts posted photos of the stars gripping bottles of Chang beer, a hugely popular local brew in Thailand.
That's all for our news today. Thanks for listening to us. You can always catch us on our social media, on our Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listening to our podcast in our YouTube channel. And you can always listen to us on the go by downloading our Durian ASEAN app. Thank you.